So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to what I believe are the Barrow Downs. At least I hope they are, because I named the last battle on this map literally the Barrow Downs in the YouTube title. But this is going to be another free-for-all, only this one is going to be a 2v2v2v2, so it might be even more chaotic, but by the same token there are some rules which are attributed to this fight, and this is something which was called the Leader's Game. And essentially there is going to be, of course, 4 teams with 2 armies in it each, and one of these teams is designated as the leader. So for example, Kuro sent me this replay, so thank you to him very much, and he is going to be the leader of this team over here. And what this means is, if his general dies, then his team has to immediately forfeit the game, and they are then out. And this is true for the other factions as well. I believe Khazad-dûm are another leader, Linden are another leader, and I think Harad are the 4th leader. So essentially, if any of the generals of those factions die, then that team must immediately forfeit the game. And in order to win the game, rather than simply destroying your opponents or killing their generals, if you are able to, well, I suppose that is a potential victory point if each team manages to kill 1 leader, but you can also win the game by killing 2 opposing leaders. So for example, if the team made up of Cardolan and his ally is Gondor over here manages to kill off, for example, the Linden and Khazad-dûm general, this team would automatically then win the game. So this is going to be slightly interesting, because it means, of course, that you have to keep your general safe, your leader safe, otherwise you have to immediately forfeit, which in some ways will engender a bit of passivity. You're going to have a defensive force to guard your general, but also you can afford to be aggressive, because all you need to do is kill 1 unit model in the army. So a good cavalry charge into a general's unit might be enough to finish them off, and then the whole 2 armies might have to retreat. So it's going to be interesting to see how this works out. And also that will have an effect on the tactics somewhat. And we'll start off with the team over here, seeing as I'm already here, and of course Cardolan. Thanks to Kuro for sending me this replay, by the way. And it'll be interesting to see how this unique set of rules plays out in the game. And his general, he's been quite clever here, because he's put his general in the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul, which is one of the more defensive picks for your general. They are multiple HP, so of course the general's going to benefit from that. They're ranged as well, and the fact is, cavalry's not really going to want to charge into them, because lighter cavalry will take that range fire on the approach and start to die off. And also in melee they are multiple HP spears, so definitely the sort of unit which in this sort of situation should serve Cardolan very well. Several units of Minas-Girthlin swordsmen, of course, just basic units, there's nothing too special about them, but they do hold the line relatively well, and of course they are well armoured as well. So, you know, they form up a decent front line. They won't set the world on fire, but they will at least guard again. Well, certainly they'll guard his general, which is going to be Cardolan's main priority in this battle. Greenwatch Garrison Footmen as well. You can see here that this man is sticking the pike through his friend in front of him, so rip. But obviously the Greenwatch Garrison Footmen are also one of the most cost-efficient cheap pikes in the game, I think, because of course they're going to be very vulnerable to missiles, as pretty much all cheaper pikemen are going to be. But if you can build a front line out of them and back them up with the armoured Cardolan infantry, that is a very tough nut to crack. And while Cardolan's morale is a little bit suspect and you can shock them and then get rid of them that way, if you try and fight them in a grind, that is honestly where Cardolan can do a lot of damage to you. Another big selling point for Cardolan is of course their crossbows, probably their main selling point, and people who like Cardolan tend to really lean on the crossbows a lot, and that's unsurprising, and the Minotaur Romen Guardians are the better of the crossbows they have. Of course you can only bring 1, but they are anti-cav in melee with those armour-piercing polearms and also crossbows at range. He's got the armour upgrade as well. Very, very strong, formerly known as the Foroshel Gatekeepers, of course. He's also got the Dunedain Captains with their armour upgrade over here, multiple HP swordsmen in a similar sort of vein as Haven Guard or Elisar's Vanguard. I'm not sure how they stack up to one another 1-to-1. That might be something to look at in the future. But they are going to be very, very strong in an infantry fight indeed. And I think they inspire nearby troops around them, so that might be why they're here, to keep these lower tier troops in line, because Cardolan do have a bit of a problem with their morale, particularly if they're up against fear-causing factions. And of course the Minas-Girthlin sharpshooters as well. They double as armour-piercing line infantry as well. They don't have particularly high attack values in melee, but just the fact that they are armour-piercing means once they're out of bolts, they can still shore up a line. Very, very versatile unit. Certainly one of the real strengths of Cardolan is to be able to field units, and skirmishers in particular. Well, they're crossbows that are good in melee. They're archers, maybe a little bit less so. Here we have the Tharbad Warhammers as well, so another multiple HP unit. Armour-piercing shock troops. Resilient, very, very strong as well. Very, very, well, can do a lot of damage very, very quickly. It'll be interesting to see how they perform in this sort of situation. It'll be interesting to see what Cardolan's plan is, actually. I would have been very tempted to load up on lower tier units and just sort of surround my general with a lot of trash that's very difficult to get through, which the Cardolan militia units are certainly good for. Tharbad Riders over here, they've undergone a few changes since 0.95 because they were quite cheap for the fact that they had 20 charge, but they are still brutal off the charge. They have less men in the unit now to sort of make up for the fact that they were consistently managing to sort of mow over entire units in 0.95. So they are one of the units which has taken a relative nerf, but they still have a very high charge, so they are going to be able to do a great deal of damage. Potentially something that can be used to assassinate a general. Over here we have the Mercenary Cavalry, which of course used to be an Eriador only unit, but now sort of spread their wings into many other factions, but Cardolan still maintain it, and it is still a melee cavalry unit, which they can use to back up their more offense-focused Tharbad Riders over here. And of course, you know, Rangers are a very, very effective unit, regardless of who you're playing with or against, and so it doesn't surprise me to see the Dunoi Rangers over here, and some more Mercenary Cavalry, again, using them in a defensive focus, I think, here for Cardolan. Let's have a look at what his allies doing though. We have Gondor, played by I'm just going to call him Zali, or Zale. We have Gondor with the Pinnith Galen Cavalry over here. As far as cavalry that you can mass, this is the best that Gondor can manage. They won't be terrible in a cav fight like some of the other lower tier Gondor cavalry will be, but they're still not ideal. Definitely not a cost-effective use of their time. But as shock cavalry, they're certainly well worth the price with their partisan spears over here, and of course that is a floating rock over there. But of course, you know, primarily they're going to be used in an offensive capacity over here. I imagine Gondor is going to go into the flank of the team just to their side and try and assassinate their general, or maybe they're going to post up on this hill over here, which is another potential option. We've got some Gondor infantry at the front, of course, without the armour upgrades, but they're still going to be of a similar sort of quality to the Minas Tirith swordsmen, and they should be able to hold for quite some time. Back over here, some more archers, only these aren't rangers, these are a little bit more. Look at those 2D trees in the background. That's one of the areas that I've sacrificed a bit of visual fidelity. But yeah, the veterans of Osgiliath, of course, they've got slightly higher range, very resilient with those shields, and they double as decent standard line infantry. And over here some Gondor archers as well. Gondor are very, very good in the skirmish fight simply because they can outlast their opposition 9 times out of 10. We do have the multiple HP lancers over here, the Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard, of course. They can be used a little bit more aggressively, simply because Gondor is not the leader faction, that is Cardolan. Citadel Guard, of course, they're not multiple HP, but they are AP spears in melee. One of the real selling points for Gondor is the amount of AP spears they have, and speaking of which, the scariest ones are the Fountain Guard over here, and of course the Shielded Fountain Guard, the Nimlothian Honor Guard. So, definitely looks like a more defensive setup here from Gondor. We'll see whether they go into the side of this army over here though. And we have Krantus playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains with a couple of units of Walk Riders out here on the flank. Definitely very good in the cav fight, but they are considerably more vulnerable than they were in 0.95. They were very, very easy to use in 0.95, to be honest with you. They were able to tank so much damage, but now considerably weaker to arrow fire, which is what they were always meant to be, but still very dangerous in a cav fight. Over here we have some heavy goblin spears. You're never going to see the Orcs of the Misty Mountains without at least a couple of units of heavy goblin spears. Over here we've got some heavy goblin infantry. Cave trolls in the background, of course. They're line breakers, very, very potent at getting through enemy lines. Heavy goblin halberdiers as well. Not often actually that I have noticed that the halberdiers are not as popular next to the heavy goblin spears, but it's good to see the halberds because they can hold up a line very, very nicely with their AP as well. Some heavy goblin archers with they're slightly more armoured than the goblin archers. There might be some goblin archers and infantry hidden around here. We'll have to wait until the battle gets underway. 3 units of Black Urks of the Mountains as well, so this is the the damage dealing core of the Misty Mountains infantry over here, and then we have some Bolgs champions as well, which is the General's Bodyguard. However, oh no, that's right, it's Isengard, not Harad, that was another commander. So Isengard over here is going to be the leader of this faction. Or team, I should say, played by Hader Lexa, and we've got some Uruk-hai archers here at the front, of course. You know, they're not going to set the world on fire either, but they will at least be able to. Orcs are always going to be able to skirmish with you relatively well, simply because they don't really care if they lose their archers. So, it'll be interesting to see how they do here. Uruk-hai pikemen, of course, fantastic for holding down the front line. And back here we have the crossbows, of course. So Cardolan don't have a monopoly on crossbows in this match. And the Uruk-hai crossbows with their new unit model, they're going to be very good at protecting Isengard's flanks from cavalry, and potentially if they can get into the flanks of the enemy, they're going to be able to do some extreme damage. And back here we have the Uruk-hai infantry upgraded, of course, so they're going to be significantly more effective. I remember back in the days when this unit model signalled death because it was the Nazkai bodyguard, but nowadays maybe a little bit less intimidating, but they're still going to be very, very good at holding down a front line, especially when you combine them with the pikes. Some Uruk-hai raiders over here. Half-orc spear guard, they used to be pretty terrible in 0.95, but it'll be interesting to see how they develop into a unit that Isengard can genuinely use in 0.96. Some Uruk-hai Raiders back here, and I assume this is the General's unit, or is it? Doesn't look like it, actually. Well, there's some Guards of War, thanks to some multiple HP Spears. Some Warg Riders over here for Isengard as well. This has got to be the General's bodyguard, surely. Unless they intend to use this unit in a more aggressive capacity, because the Champions of the White Hand are the most damaging Warg unit in the game, even more damaging than the Melkor's Chosen. But they do pay for that with a bit of a gulf in their survivability. Then over here we have... where are we? Linden, played by Josh. And this is going to be another one of the leader factions. We can actually see the Wardens of Alos Tyrion over here, moving immediately. Very, very lethal. The Orcs don't really want to get too close to the Wardens if they can help it. And then we've got Mithlon Swordmasters and Noldorin Blade Masters, and this is going to be the General's unit. So they are actually kind of vulnerable in this respect, but we'll see how that goes. 4 Linden Pikemen and Harlinden Infantry, the classic Linden front line, and some 4 Linden Archers at the front, as well as some Harlinden Guard for a skirmish force, and some Noldorin Horse Lords out on that flank, and some Wardens of Harlinden over here, which are the Horse Archer. Indeed, not many people bring the Horse Archers apparently for Linden, which is interesting. Or is that the Javelin Cavalry? Well, there's talk about the meta going on all over the place, to be fair. And then over here we have Lister, or Leicester, playing as the Realm of Mirkwood. He's got some Roykabin Amon Lank here. And then his general is going to be the Ir Abranon I Nunwaith. And the rest of his army is technically hidden from view, at least on the mini-map, but we can still see them. Mirkwood's bound to have tons of hidden units here, so I'm not going to be able to see all of their army. Some Here E Orth over here, the best infantry unit they can field, at least the best line infantry they can hold, shielded infantry. Some Megiel E Erin here at the front, as well as some Thrandrim E Erin, and some Here E X. So Mirkwood are capable of putting up a pretty decent front line. Their problem is often that they can get overwhelmed because they don't have as much numbers, of course, but Merc would make up for this by having very, very potent ambush troops. More Here E Orth, and then we have some Dagnirim Ik E Erin, which are going to be, of course, Horse Archers. Now, for the final team, which seem to have sort of laid out their intent very early here by engaging in some tactical geometry, but we have Frishjuice, who is the leader of this team over here, playing as Khazad-dûm. And seeing as it's Khazad-dûm, I'm more inclined to forgive such behaviour, especially when they've got Erebor just over there, played by Solomon, so the Dwarves uniting. Some Orc Hunters, of course. They can be skirmished down, but they also have some pretty decent missile damage on them. 7 is nothing to sniff at, and they'll be able to do some decent damage, particularly to Elves on the approach. It'll be interesting to see how they do. 1st Legion Pikes, of course, fantastic pike unit this. Going through the front of them is definitely not recommended. And then over here we've got some 4th Legion. In a field battle, the 4th Legion are going to be almost a must to bring us Khazad-dûm. And then some Warriors of Khazad-dûm over here, sort of the basic infantry. Some Sons of the Fallen, so even more spears. And then back here we've got some more Warriors, some 3rd Legion, some 2nd Legion as well, so they do have some armour piercing. Not going to be too useful against the Elves, but very useful against the humans potentially. And then some Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, and then the General is going to be in a unit of Guards of Khazad-dûm, so definitely not the easiest task to assassinate Balin when he's in a unit that has 3 HP. And then finally over here we have Solomon playing as the Dwarves of Erebor. He won the last match on this map, so we'll see how he does this time. Mercenary Cavalry, so they've got some manoeuvrability on the field. Doesn't look like he's brought the Goats though. The Goats are going to get buffed actually. They're going to get buffed in a hotfix, which is just going to get added into 0.96 I believe. But news of that will follow on the Discord, I'm sure. Ironfoot Spears on the front line, of course, with their mass. Being backed up by some Axe Throwers. It'll be interesting to see how they can do in this sort of situation. His general is going to be a unit of Highborns of Erebor. They are 2 HP. Very, very solid unit indeed. Erebor Legionnaires are also going to get a bit of a buff in an upcoming sort of mini hotfix, as it were. And they are going to be made to be sort of the real stalwarts of the Erebor front line. And then over here, the final cluster of units, we have some Axe Guard of Erebor combined with some Ironfoot crossbows on this flank, and some more spears and some more legionnaires. So, without further ado, let's begin. Interesting to see how this is going to work, because we have the humans over here, the elves in the south, the dwarves and orcs to each side, so place your bets on which race is going to be superior here. This is actually a situation in which the elves may struggle a little bit, because I think of all of the factions they're going to be a little bit more vulnerable to having their general assassinated, because they simply can surround him with less cannon fodder. Whereas the orcs and dwarves have certainly sort of, well, the dwarves in particular are just sort of going to hold up over here, but that has some downsides of its own, because, you know, one way you can win this is by killing off 2 of the enemy generals. If the dwarves sort of sit there, they won't be able to do that, so they'll be relying on sort of enemy leaders staying alive if they post up over in that position over there. But it looks as though we're sort of going to split off 2 and 2. The elves looks like they're going to be moving over to here, or are they going to... Are they just going to post up? Well, Linden are going to be moving over to Mirkwood, and then Mirkwood are going to be converging on the Dwarves. Meanwhile, looks like the Orcs are going to be moving off en masse. Isengard following the Elves. Need to be careful that they don't leave their ally behind. The Misty Mountains definitely need to follow Isengard if that is their plan. However, there's going to be a lot of manoeuvring in this fight, I have a feeling, simply because you don't want to engage half-heartedly, otherwise you're going to lose half your army for nothing, and if you throw your general in there, you risk losing the battle for your team. At least the leaders do. I think I will make a little cut until the first engagements happen, simply because, well, actually, Mirkwood is sort of moving forward with some intent onto the Dwarven defensive positions, although I'm not sure what Khazad-dûm are going to do about it. I think the Dwarves are probably just going to hold their ground, to be fair, now that the Elves are coming towards them. Horse archers won't really serve them too well against the Dwarves. Most of the Dwarven units are going to be pretty well armoured to the harassment that these units can provide, and also the Dwarven archers are going to be able to spray them down easily. Mirkwood don't do too well under archer fire, it must be said. But yeah, I think I will actually make a little cut here until the first engagements happen, because I get the feeling there's going to be a lot of posturing and manoeuvring until the action really gets started. So we have some action over here. The cavalry of Cardolan is making a big play over here for the Misty Mountains as they start to manoeuvre around. So Isengard and Misty moving is going to try and be exploited, although mercenary cavalry is not likely to have too much of an impact on the Misty Mountains lines, especially not when there's so many spears, halberds, and in particular when the wargs are around. And Gondor's lancers won't be able to add too much to that equation either, neither will the Tharbad riders. The Orcs are better placed than most to deal with cavalry harassment like this, especially when there's a limited amount of teeth involved. I mean, Tharbad riders and the Pynith cavalry do decent damage off the charge, but the wargs are going to be able to cut through them so quickly because of their lack of HP and relative lack of armour in the case of the Tharbad riders. But Gondor's infantry is moving around. Meanwhile, the skirmish fight is beginning over here. The Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm are firing. Mirkwood are firing back. Thurney Tower versus the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm. Two more glass cannon-esque units, although the superior position of the dwarves here is going to mean the Orc Hunters are going to have a little bit more of a favourable engagement, and Mirkwood are, generally speaking, going to be more reliant on their skirmishers to do damage, which means I imagine that the dwarves would probably have been the less favourable pick for them to go after, to be honest with you, especially with Linden. They've also got a little bit more skirmisher heavy. A very nervy start here from everyone. The cavalry did move in across here, but they quickly pulled back when they realised that the wargs were close, and I don't blame them. Again, the human cavalry is not likely to have too much of an impact here on the orc lines. The amount of spears, wargs and crossbows that Isengard have brought to the fray as well, and those champions of the White Hand are going to be able to dumpster anything that the humans have on horseback. Really, the Cardolan crossbows are going to be very necessary to deal with the champions. They are an incredibly powerful unit. Arguably Isengard's strongest unit, all things considered. But we shall see. Still a bit of manoeuvring going on. Gondor forming up a front line. And the quality of the Gondor front line should be enough to dissuade the orcs from simply moving in unthinkingly. Meanwhile, what is going on back over here? Again, looks like the skirmish is still just continuing. The Orc Hunters have still got a shot on some of these units. Are they firing at, I wonder? Some of these basic units firing into the Megil E. Erin, doing a decent amount of damage as well. You have to remember the Mirkwood basic infantry, particularly the lower tier infantry like this, doesn't have the best armour. They are shielded, but the Orc Hunters do have pretty high missile damage for their tier. And they're also sending forward some 4th Legion, 2 units of 4th Legion spears, so they won't be charged from the front necessarily. A very nervy affair so far. I get the feeling everything's going to kick off all at once in this fight, because it's not an overly long battle either. 26,000 frames for a battle with 8 armies on the field is not all that long. You have to remember, as soon as a general is assassinated, that's it. 2 armies could potentially be gone in the blink of an eye. Khazad-dûm forming up a big part of the front line over here. Where are those? Where are the guards of Khazad-dûm? They're over here, which is, well, relatively safe, I suppose, behind a mound. The elves are moving over here. I'm not sure much is going to happen over here as of yet. And again, looks like Gondor moving forwards. getting their skirmish line into a position. And while it isn't often favourable to try and skirmish with the Orcs, Gondor are one of the factions that can do it if they invest enough, simply because they have decent archers that can stand up to punishment, and the Orcs don't exactly have the most quality ammunition. There's a lot of pikes going on here as well. Interesting to see how this plays out, although that is only a single unit of Gondor archers that have gone out there. I'm a little bit confused as to what is actually going on here, because a single unit is going to be able to be skirmished down by the full force of the Goblin and Uruk-hai archers. And this is another very puzzling move from Kuro, sending forward his relatively unarmoured and completely unshielded pikemen to be shot, unless this is a ruse to try and get Gondor to set his archers up into a decent position. It's bait, perhaps. There's also the Dunedain Rangers, which could do a huge amount of damage to the Orc lines. Still a relatively nervy affair, the veterans of Osgiliath moving forward. This is a very narrow form of engagement that Cardolan and Gondor have sort of set themselves up in, but they don't have any danger of being flanked, so I don't blame them for sort of front-loading. The army is, well, the battle is essentially split up into two mini-battles, as opposed to the last free-for-all of this map, which was chaos between all four of them. Oof. Having a look over there, that is a lot of arrows that have gone into this position over here. And those Greenwatch Garrison footmen have paid a bit of a price over there. Meanwhile, what's going on over here? You can see those Abranon Inanwaith did charge in frontally into those warriors of Khazad-dûm and didn't really get all that much work done. With the archers just in behind them, Merc would have a real problem keeping their cavalry alive when there are archers present. They are certainly not the most armoured faction in the world, and neither are Linden, so the Orc Hunters are definitely going to have a very favourable time in this battle if they're used effectively. The Thurney Tower are moving forward as well. And I think the Dwarves are just going to be able to outlast the Elves here. The Elves are kind of reliant on the Dwarves coming to them. Wardens of Harlenden shuffling around. Still a relatively quiet time over here though. Skirmishers going toe-to-toe. Heavy Goblin Archers, they look... I thought that was blood then, but it's just the brown in their uniforms. If you can call them uniforms. But all of the Orcs are sort of front-loading their archers here. Be interesting to see who wins in this skirmish fight. You can see these Goblin infantry immediately routing, following a charge from the Tharbad Riders, which is very unsurprising. These Minotaur Rummen Guardians are up here on the hill, but they're armoured enough to the point where they can probably take, especially when you see how inaccurate the Orcs are, their hit chance at this range is not going to be all that great. So, sort of tougher crossbows like this are going to be able to withstand a great deal more skirmish fire. And they've also got the Minas Tirith and sharpshooters who are reloading. Don't know if they want to attack the Goblin infantry necessarily. Meanwhile, Krantz is sending over his wargs around this flank. This mercenary cavalry is going to come in over here, but the wargs are going to be able to put them to the sword pretty quickly. More mercenary cavalry. They're going to need some support, although the mercenary cavalry victory is a distinct possibility. It's possible, well, the wargs are just pushing on through now to the crossbows. So now, it's all kicking off. The balance of forces is evenly matched, although the wargs don't really want to go near the Minotaur Roman Guardians with those pole arms. The pikes are being pulled out to help against the wargs, and now, I think it's about time we turn the speed down a little bit, because Krantz is going to be leading the way with his cave trolls. He's going to try and smash through the front line, which they should be able to, honestly. Even when the front line is relatively thick like this, if the cave trolls are forced path through, they can get in behind. Although how far they would get is debatable. The veterans of Osgiliath are certainly not shrinking violets in melee. The Uruk-hai infantry, the upgraded Uruk-hai infantry, backed up by those Uruk-hai pikemen, is going to be forming up a good front line. It'll be interesting to see whose front line is going to be superior here. Goblin infantry routing off. Minas Tirith sharpshooters out on this flank. What are they doing over here? They're going to get charged into oblivion by these warg riders. Although maybe they were a bit of bait so that these Dunedain Rangers can get some close range shots into these warg riders. It's entirely possible. There are no Citadel Guardsmen back there as well. This is strange. But it looks like we're going to be going for a bit of concentration of force over here in the middle. Haida Lexa has sent forward her Uruk-hai to back up these cave trolls. And the cave trolls, you know, you can see how they're slowly but surely pushing their way through this front line. And then if the Orcs can spill in and just sort of spread out through the line, then it will be Won't be the most ideal situation for Cardolan and Gondor, but really at this point, now that the Orcs have gone all in, it's going to be a case of whether Cardolan and Gondor can stand up and withstand this Orc barrage. Because if they can, then the Orcs should fall apart as time goes on. What is going on over here? These walls are broken, in fact, so the presence of the pole arms, I assume, because these mercenary cavalry have been fairly victorious over here, and I think the Wargs should beat them 1-1, unless it was a charge from the Tharbad Riders, because off the charge the Wargs can still take a huge amount of damage. Got some heavy Goblin Spears pushing out here. Over here, I think the Orcs are having a much better time of it. And we can see that more Uruk-hai Raiders are being committed to this fight over here. The Greenwatch Garrison and victory seems certain, but I think they're probably going to be overwhelmed, and the Pinnith-Gelling Cavalry over here is certainly not going to have the most fun time when they're being swarmed by Orcs like this. Gandalf's retinue bodyguard are retreating. Minas Tirith and sharpshooters are routing and broken as a result of the charges they took from the Wargs. The Goblin infantry has returned, although how useful they're going to be is highly debatable. Just forming more chaff for the front line. Speaking of the front line, you can see there's a lot of these Uruk-hai here, and when they're backed up by the pikes and the trolls, you can see the damage they've done to the centre of the human front line over here. Minas Tirith and swordsmen being sent forward to plug the line, but they'll only do that temporarily. I think what they're trying to do is save these Tharbad Warhammers until the Orcs look relatively weak, and then they'll try and charge forward and smash their lines to bits. The Uruk-hai pikes need to form up. What's going on over here? You can see the heavy Goblin Spears. They want to get into these crossbows, but the crossbows are going to be shooting into the Orcs as they advance from the sides. Let's just go and have a quick look at what's going on over here. Still nothing going on over here. The Elves and the Dwarves not wanting to advance into one another. Look at all these Orcs. Now the Black Uruks, the mountains being committed forward, they'll do a decent amount of damage. The Gondor infantry won't do too well against them, even if they're not AP. Their attack will still stand them in very good stead. The archers firing into that. Look at those Greenwatch Garrison footmen holding up longer than I would expect them to. Cardolan's morale is not the best, and they were completely overrun a long time ago. Let's go back up to 1 speed, I think. Ooh, 1 speed. The Tharbad Warhammers have now been committed to the fight. They'll do extreme amounts of damage to basic units of Uruk-hai. But the trolls are still present, so the Tharbad Warhammers won't get damage done for free. These heavy Goblin Spears are probably going to be able to cut their way through these Greenwatch Garrison Spears. The Citadel Guard moving in, engaging these heavy Goblin Archers in melee. Needless to say, the Citadel Guard will do horrendous amounts of damage, especially when they receive a charge from any form of cavalry, and indeed that sends them routing off. Mountain Orc Berserkers from Krantis coming forward, trying to keep track of everything over here. Tharbad Riders are actually routing off and broken now, so the Warg Riders do have a victory over on this flank. And they are going to need to move in and silence these Cardolan crossbows, because if they're allowed to keep firing, I do worry for the Orcs somewhat. And you can see the crossbows firing into the side of that huge blob of Orc infantry over here. The Uruk-hai pikemen are still... Victory does... Well, the balance of forces is evenly matched, but the longer the skirmish fire is poured into areas like this, the worse it's going to be. And that is the problem with concentration of force. You do paint a huge target on your head. That is a big blood spray over here, so the Rangers are clearly in effect, and indeed they are. There's some routing Pinnith-Gelling cavalry over there, but the Champions of the White Hand are looming large. And those Athelian Rangers as well, so 2 units of Rangers, but the Champions of the White Hand charging forwards. And the Dunedain Rangers are not firing into them. And now the Dunedain Rangers, they turn their backs to the Champions of the White Hand, but there's no escape at this point. Although the Champions of the White Hand chicken out. That's surprising. The Gandalf's retinue bodyguard would be no match for the Champions of the White Hand in melee, especially not when there are Black Uruks swamping the field, and shutting down the skirmish line would probably be enough to give victory to the Orcs. Although that remains to be seen. The Cardolan General is somewhat near the front line, which is dangerous, but the Half-Guard of Amon Sul's ranged prowess is going to be required here. The Warg Riders are cresting the hill. Minas Tirith and sharpshooters is going to fire point blank into them, which the Wargs don't have the highest morale. That might be sufficient to break them, although it doesn't look like it's going to be. And their AP won't serve them all that well against the Warg Riders in melee. What's going on back here? And indeed, the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard is retreating. Really, the only hope to deal with these Champions of the White Hand is to try and kite them and to get the Rangers to kill them. The Fountain Guard are on the front line, which will shore up the front for quite some time. The Nimlothi and Honor Guard, if they catch up to the Champions of the White Hand, that will lay them pretty low as well. These Gondor archers taking a charge from the champions of the White Hand. This is a very close fight going on over here at this point, and keeping an eye on the minimap, it doesn't look as though the dwarves and the elves are too eager to engage in anything other than a skirmish fight at this stage. But I think the Fountain Guard are going to be the thing which ultimately are going to be a big pain in the neck for the orcs here, because they're not really going to be able to deal with them from the front. They're going to have to rear charge them, and that means putting their champions of champions off the White Hand in harm's way. The Gandalf's retinue bodyguard charging into the side of those Uruk-hai raiders. That was bold, because now they're going to be trapped in between them and the champions of the White Hand, and probably destroyed. The champions of the White Hand are devastating to cavalry units, but the Nimlothian Honor Guard are trying to charge them down as well. Several routing units of orcs. The Citadel Guard have slowly but surely been pushing their way around the flank, and their armour piercing really standing them in good stead against the heavy goblins. These wargs are continuously charging into the Minas Tirith and sharpshooters, which they're needed as a human shield now, because if they get to the Hearthguard of Amon Sul and kill the general off the charge, that would be a real tragedy. There's so many heavy goblins over here that they are actually going to be victorious against the Menotal Roman Guardians if nothing changes, but I think Kuro, sensing the danger, is going to send over his Tharbad Warhammers, which in a sustained fight will be enough to lay a lot of hurt. Even if the Warg Riders are not armoured, that's still going to do a lot of damage to them. Rangers that are out of ammunition are being hounded by these champions of the White Hand, which now that they're behind the lines, that could be pretty costly, because there's nothing really back here anymore which can stop the champions of the White Hand from cycle charging. The Fountain Guard are going to be needed more than ever. And you can see that the Fountain Guard are causing the humans to seem like they're going to be victorious here on the front line, but the Heavy Goblin Spears are tying up these Nimlothian Honor Guard, which are really the one unit I can imagine putting a serious dent in the champions of the White Hand at this point. They have taken losses, but not enough to really blunt their effectiveness. And they're going to charge into these veterans of Osgiliath, and that's going to do some serious damage off the charge. You can see so many of them fall. And Gondor infantry is not going to be sufficient to bring them down. It's going to take a heavy-duty unit to destroy them. Meanwhile, these Warg Riders, there are only 7 of them left from Haida Lexa, and that's not going to be enough to kill the Hearthguard of Amon Sul. Spearmen in melee, of course, and now these Minas Tirith and sharpshooters are freed up a little bit. Tharbad Warhammers. The Orc General is still further out of the fight, though. I think it's in the Guards of Orthanc, which means it's safer than the Hearthguard at this point. And there are still the Bolg champions as well, so all of these wargs could prove to be a real problem. Just go over here quickly to see what's happening. Still absolutely bugger all. Good to know. Meanwhile, the Uruk-hai archers that are out of ammunition pouring forwards, and now the Fountain Guard are just being overwhelmed, so I think the orcs are going to be able to pull this one out of the bag. I feel as though the mistake was allowing the wargs, in particular the champions of the White Hand, to run roughshod all over your back lines. The skirmishers were really the key to the human success. And that's always a bit dicey when you're dealing with the Misty Mountains in particular. Hearthguard of Amon Sul still reloading. What are they firing at? Just the Heavy Goblin Archers? Those Menotar Roman Guardians are not going to be able to hold back the horde of Heavy Goblin Spears forever. The humans have been victorious down on this side, but I don't think they've been victorious to the extent that they're going to need. There are those Bolg champions back there. Tharbad Warhammers. I think really the only chance for the humans at this point is to try and assassinate the enemy general, but the Guards of Orthanc are in a relatively safe position. The champions of the White Hand are hovering relatively close to them. Look at all these orcs. So the orcs are going to be victorious over here, but the question is, at what cost? They will probably end up well, the champions of the White Hand, that's bold, charging into the Nimlothian Honor Guard who are AP, and sending the Guards of Orthanc in there as well if it's their general. I'm pretty sure it's their general, I'm not sure what else it could be, to be fair, at this point. But the Nimlothian Honor Guard could honestly kill the Guards of Orthanc. There goes the Bolg's champions, and it's at the hands of the Dunedain captains who've managed to worm their way into the enemy's back lines. This is still relatively close. I mean, the orcs, with those champions of the White Hand, and with the amount of numbers they have, you still wouldn't bet against them. But I do worry, if the general is in this unit of Guards of Orthanc, based on the rules of the game, if the general dies, then Isengard and the Misty Mountains will have to admit defeat, even if they still have a you know, the advantage, technically speaking. And these Fountain Guard, defeat now seems like a possibility, now that they're being surrounded. But they will fight to the end. The Fountain Guard are not the sort of thing which go quietly into that good night. These champions of the White Hand have been cycle charging to great effect. Those Hearthguard of Amon-Sul taking a lot of skirmish fire now from Uruk-hai crossbows, so the general is likely not long for this world unless he retreats. And these champions of the White Hand are probably going to chase him down as well. So this is a bit of... it's desperate times for the humans, but they could still be victorious. The Dunedain captains are coming over here as well. I mean, I think the general is in this unit here. Well, there goes the Gondorian general, which Nimlothi and Honor Guard are being overwhelmed here. The humans will need to get hugely lucky, I think, in order to pull this one out of the bag. Which means the Orcs will be victorious over here, of course. These champions of the White Hand are probably going to try and push through. Indeed they are, trying to assassinate the general. But again, that's risky as well. Is this the general's bodyguard? Like, again, it's hard to tell who the Isengard general is, because so many of the unit models look similar to the general now. The champions of the White Hand, the basic Uruk-hai infantry with armour upgrades, that's bold. The Uruk-hai crossbows now in range. I don't know. I mean, I'm glad that the other fight hasn't really started in earnest here, so that we can focus on one at a time. Dunedain captain, defeat seems certain. The guards of Orthanc still in relatively good shape after the Nimlothi and Honor Guard were overwhelmed and destroyed. Is the general over here? I mean, the Cardolan general is somehow still alive, despite taking several crossbow shots at relatively close range. Surely the Cardolan general will fall. I mean, now there's halberdiers coming up as well. These Manatar Roman Guardians have held the line for so long. More and more heavy goblins have been required to bring them down. Look at this Cardolan general, running for the hills. Needing to get out of there. These Fountain Guard as well. Still just holding back the tide. A lot of these units are skirmishers though. Right, let's just take a quick look at what's going on over here. Linden and Mirkwood sending out their forces to the flank, and look at the dwarves here, they've been slowly inching their way forward in a very long formation. Still nothing has really happened though. What is going on over here? Where is the Isengard general? I can only assume it is... I mean, I could just look for the star on the radar. Should have done that at the start, but now everything is just one big red blob. Fountain Guard being chased off by Bolg's champions. What is going on here? Well, we could play the Benny Hill theme at this point. That's Citadel Guard. Where are they? Here they are, the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul, because they're pretty much the only thing left for the Cardolan army. And they're being hounded by Hayder Lexa's Uruk-hai crossbows. I mean, all it really takes is the champions to White Hand, or what's left of the Bolg's champions, to zero them in, get a good charge off, and based on the damage they've already taken, I can't imagine the Hearthguard would last all that much longer. And it would appear that Kuro agrees, because he's just going to charge into the Uruk-hai. This is going to be a bolt through the skull for the general, surely. Amazingly, no, he's still alive. Look at this guy. That is quite amusing. Still he lives. Oh, there goes the champions of the White Hand. What is that? Look at that. He died in midair. Madness. I don't think either of those are the general, so I don't think Cardolan would be able to pull off some sort of miracle here. He's also going to get shot point blank. There he goes. So the humans are the first to fall. Now what will the Orcs do from here? All they need to do now, in order to win, is to assassinate one of the enemy generals. One of the leaders. So if he kills the Khazad-dûm general or the Linden general, then the Orcs will win. And honestly, I think the dwarves would probably be the better target. The elves are a little bit further away. They posted up on this hill. The skirmish fight has been going on for quite some time, it would seem. All of this infantry and no one wants to use it. I'm more surprised that the dwarves have been content to sit back, honestly, because they can certainly absorb this much pressure, but their infantry is going to be able to take the skirmish fire as they move across the field, and the elves are going to have insufficient numbers to deal with the dwarves enveloping them. Maybe it's the cavalry that worries the dwarves, because there is a fair amount of that going on. Meanwhile, looks like there is a bit of engagement going on up here. Well, there was at the very least. The Roykabin Amon Lank being warded off. They are spear cavalry, so they won't be too bad in a melee with other cavalry. Oh, excuse me, allergies. The Wardens of Harlingen moving forward as well, trying to get some skirmish fire. Axguard of Erebor wouldn't be the worst choice of target for that. Again, we don't have all that much longer left in the battle to go, so I'm wondering if maybe the Orcs managed to get off a sneaky assassination, which would be interesting. And it would also punish the Elves and the Dwarves for taking so long over their fight if the Orcs simply come in and win it quickly. Again, if I were the Elves, I certainly... well, going after the Orcs wouldn't have been too preferable either, considering the armies they brought, but probably would have been better off going for the Orcs than going for the Dwarves, with the amount of archers they brought. And honestly, the Elven cavalry in this sort of situation would have been good versus the Wargs as well, with the amount of horse archers they had. But que sera. What's going on back there? We can see the elk in the background. Maybe a sneaky assassination attempt. Although, where are the... I think the guards of Khazad-dûm are still up here. So they are very safe indeed. Look at this, though. We've got some Napoleon total war going on here. People very content to shoot each other from afar. Some Orc hunters moving forward as well. I mean, I can't imagine that the dwarves are going to outright win this skirmish fight, so I'm not sure why they're content to sit back like this. Because if they force the engagement and force the elven skirmishers out of position, then yes, they would win the skirmish fight, because the elves won't be able to return fire. Let's have a look over here. The Roykabin Amon Lank, combined with the Wardens of Harlingen, send the mercenary cavalry running for the hills, which again is very unsurprising. And at this point, a bit of proactiveness is needed from the dwarves, especially because if they don't move quickly, or if they don't sort of move from their current position, then they're going to be surrounded. I would even understand if they made a retreat to sort of defend around this mound over here. But at this point, the advantage is in the Orcs' favour. They may have the smallest army left, but based on the rules of the battle, all they need to do is kill the enemy general, one of the enemy generals. I mean, slowly but surely, they are poking one another to death, but not to a huge extent. That was a very weak source charge there into the back of those Ironfoot spears. Getting one kill before being forced to retreat. There were no crossbows on hand to take advantage of that. On the other hand, these Roykabin Amon Lank are going to charge into these Axguard of Erebor, getting a decent amount of kills there. And the Elk are sort of making their presence felt now in the back lines. Getting some good kill, well, getting some damage done at the very least on those highborns, but their multiple HP will save them from an initial charge. And there are the Dagnir in the background over there, horse archers of course. Their charge is terrible, but it looks like finally the dwarves are taking matters into their own hands a little bit. I mean, the Orc hunters getting routed off almost immediately by the High Elven firing squad. Linden count as High Elves as well, surely. Meanwhile, the 3rd Legion moving in. Naturally they should beat the Thurney Tower, but with the Mirkwood infantry just shortly behind them, the dwarves could get overwhelmed without support. But the Sons of the Fallen are no pushovers in melee. They're going to need a little bit more though, I think. Concentration of force out here on the flank. I mean, the Linden General is in the Noldoran Blade Masters. Surprised the dwarves haven't tried to focus them down, to be honest with you. But the Wardens of Alos Tyrian have got a nasty position here on the hill now. And the 4th Legion looming large. The Orc hunters are still firing, so they still have ammunition. Meanwhile, victory seems certain for the 3rd Legion now that they're backed up by the Sons of the Fallen. And Mirkwood are going to have to divert more infantry resources to try and bottle this up. This leaves Linden to sort of deal with the central push, and there aren't enough 4th Legion here to really make too much of a dent, especially not when there are Linden pike units around. There's also some Hethley Tower over there as well. But the dwarves are now finally moving forward, as they probably should have done earlier on in the fight, to be honest with you. Trying to push that numbers advantage. What's going on here? 30 tower, still got some ammunition, still firing away. Khazad-dûm reclaimers are being moved forward. I do worry that the guards of Khazad-dûm are now a little bit isolated. Where are the guards of Khazad-dûm? Well, that's the Irabranon Inanwaith. That is the Khazad-dûm reclaimers. Where's the Dwarven General gone? Well, the Khazad-dûm Dwarven General, I should specify. He has vanished into the ether. Interesting, or is this him over here? Did he commit him to the front line? He did. So the Dwarven General is on the front line, but with their 3 HP, they should be able to withstand more of a beating than most, although if the Wardens of Alos Tyrian catch wind of this, I can't imagine they'll pass up the opportunity to fight them. I'm not sure why the Sons of the Fallen are pulling out of the fight. I think they were pursuing a unit that was routing, in fact. Here, Eak. Now the elves are sort of starting to gain a bit of an upper hand on this front line. And their cavalry is also going to be able to charge into the dwarves here, the Noldorin Horse Lords, going after the Ironfoot crossbowmen. Definitely a worthwhile target, prevent your general from being assassinated. There isn't a huge amount of time left in this fight at this point though. The Erebor Legionaries charging in, bit of lag there, charging into the Noldorin Horse Lords, but that's not where the Linden General is, so this isn't going to mean doom for the elves. I do wonder who's going to win this, actually. I mean, I can only imagine that the orcs, based on the time left, those Khazad-dûm reclaimers firing into the elven line, but I mean, they really need to find some way of assassinating the elven general, because if they don't, then the guards of Khazad-dûm on this front line will likely become the focus of any elven ranged pressure that may be here, in particular if they're able to get a cavalry charge into the rear of Balin's bodyguard. Those Wardens of Harlanden, though, just took a full volley from the Khazad-dûm reclaimers, but here come the Elk, dealing with those Ironfoot Axeros in the background there, the Dagnirin, but in particular the Nunwaith are going to be able to do a lot of damage to them. Here come the Delupang Iamonduia, just trying to shore up the front line a bit, and the dwarves are starting to struggle here. They spread themselves a bit thin, and I think they waited a bit too long to advance. The crossbows are a pretty good warding tool against cavalry, and I feel as though they probably should have used them and not been quite so afraid to advance forward. I think it's going to end up costing them here. I mean, they've still got a relatively strong position over here. Khazad-dûm reclaimers are still doing a great deal of damage to the enemy lines, and it's possible the Khazad-dûm reclaimers could do a pretty hefty amount of damage. All I can see on the map at this point are the general's bodyguards. So you can see the Abranon Inanwaith moving forward as we move into the final 2,000 frames. Erebor Legionaries, I mean, they're not going to be sufficient to help break through this Forlinden pipeline, in my opinion. Now here could be an interesting move, because the Khazad-dûm reclaimers, if they've still got ammunition and if they see the Noldorin Blade Masters coming for them, although to be fair, looks like the Khazad-dûm reclaimers, the infantry line that was protecting them has all but vanished. And now the Hethely Tower with their dual axes and the Noldorin Blade Masters are probably just going to put them to the sword incredibly quickly. At this point I would say that the Elk probably just need to recharge the guards of Khazad-dûm, who are still fighting hard. It'll be interesting to see how this ends, because there's a relatively short amount of time left. What is going on back here? Still the Elk charging around. The Abranon Inanwaith getting into the Highborns of Erebor. There goes the Erebor General. Well, he wasn't riding anything as such. Medieval 2 announcers sure are something, especially the runic one. Meanwhile, Khazad-dûm reclaimers, they're going to be victorious against the Hethely Tower, but just the fact that they can, if they do still have ammunition, if they're being denied the ability to throw that, that's going to be a pretty big deal as the fight goes on here. The guards of Khazad-dûm fighting hard. What's that? The dwarves have admitted defeat. Oh, if Erebor was their was their commander? I'll have to ask. I'm sure Kuro will elaborate, but I would assume that Erebor were the commanders then, and they had to admit defeat after the general in the Highborns of Erebor died. So that means elves versus orcs. And if the elves still have a lot of long-range skirmishers, I would back the elves to win in this situation, because I can't imagine. There are some Bolgs champions over there, but the Isengard General is... Where is the Isengard General? Red Stars. I mean, it must be this unit. Yeah, it must be the Guards of Orthanc. The Guards of Orthanc are about to be assassinated, I think. What's going on here? It's time to turn it up to 2 speed. Wait a minute, what's going on? The elves routed off and broke? What? I'm confused. What happened? Why are the dwarves and elves routing? I mean, I can understand the dwarves, but the elves still had their position, surely. I'm very confused. That is a very weird way to end it. I mean, I suppose technically the orcs win. The humans got the most kills because, of course, they were fighting against the orcs. You know, the dwarves, oof, that is a poor return on Erebor's army. They're only 377. Even against the elves, you'd expect to get more than that. Elves were decent. I don't understand why the elves admitted defeat. Surely they... I think they could have won that, surely. They had the skirmisher advantage, certainly. They could have assassinated the general in the unit of Guards of Orthanc. Very odd indeed. Anyway, we'll have a look at Kuro's stats. Hearthguard of Amon Sul, when they were committed, they did okay. Minas Girthlin Sharpshooters getting a good return. This one did not, only 4 kills. Charged and shut down very early on. Getting over 160 kills there on a unit of Greenwatch Garrison Footman. Dunedain Captains did very well to worm their way in behind the enemy lines and do a lot of damage. The Tharbad Warhammers did okay. Nothing that really stands out too much. The Dunedain Rangers doing well. But yeah, I mean, the Orcs certainly won on that front. I don't really know how to call this though. I mean, I guess we can say that the Orcs won. I'm sure most people will downvote this video just for that. But, you know, the Orcs technically win. I think that the Elves probably could have won that if they still had a decent amount of archer ammo, especially from their Wardens of Elos Tyrion, but, you know, I guess Kuro will elaborate down in the comments, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this for what it was, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.